Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So this is part 2 of my elaborated sexual abuse story. If you haven't seen my first recount of my sexual abuse story, I will leave it on the card above. But without further ado, let's get started.
And trying to remain so strong, I know it's good if I'm wrong. I got it, I gotta go, running to better times.
So for me, the grooming process was about 6 months. The grooming process was basically from like 17 and a half to 18 and into just past my 18th birthday. I didn't really know what was happening. Before I get started, I just wanted to put a huge trigger warning out there. I'm going to be talking about sexual abuse and the themes relating to that. I also briefly mentioned themes of aggression and also like different relationships. So if you're not in the right frame of mind to listen to that sort of thing right now, then skip this video. I've got plenty of other videos on my channel. It doesn't matter, you can come back to this if you feel that you're ever in the right headspace again. But if you don't want to watch it because it's too triggering, then please don't watch it. The last thing I'd want to do is actually trigger anybody. Just to add into here, like the mentally unwell, by that I mean I was actively self-harming, I was suicidal, I was depressed, I went through different stages of an eating disorder, I was just really unwell basically, and I think that kind of allowed him to control me more. So that's kind of, you know, how I think he kind of used everything against me. And so he, you know, used to get me to wear these tights. And I, you know, as I said, I hated wearing tights, and he said the nylon helped transfer his powers. And, you know, I believed him because he was somebody I trusted, and like, you know, that kind of was a big thing in my, you know, I looked at it and I didn't really understand what he was doing, but I just trusted him. And then it got worse. So it went from him touching my feet to then saying, you know, that Demi was pregnant. And I don't know if she was, you know, it was something that he'd made up, I think. And basically he had said she was pregnant and that she kept bleeding and she didn't want to lose the baby and all these bits and pieces. And obviously that isn't true. If you now know Demi, you know they haven't had any kids, so, you know. But at the time he said that she was pregnant. So she hadn't announced it on social media, but apparently he knew this because he was friends with Demi, so... But then when I look back at it, I think, why would Demi be friends with this old guy from a completely different country and all these different bits and pieces? But at the time, I believed him. And that's the important thing to remember here, is at the time, I believed him. Now I can see it was an absolute, like, rubbish, what he was saying. Like, everything was made up. And actually at the police, when I actually told the police about it, he confessed to not knowing Demi and not knowing Jessie J. I know that bit was made up, so pretty much everything from there was made up. And because the whole abuse was surrounded about using my two idols against me, like, that always confirmed that everything he was saying was complete and utter bull. So yeah, but anyway, so he then started touching me in my private area, and I'm going to refer to it as my private area because we're on YouTube and I don't really know what I'm allowed to say and what I'm not allowed to say, but because I'm getting into this abuse story more in depth, I want to use the word private area. So he used to touch me on my private area. He touched me initially on my private area, and at one point he actually put his fingers inside. So this is when it was, you know, sexual abuse. And at the time, I, you know, didn't like it. I remember really not liking it. But at the time, I also didn't know how to say no. Because he had wrapped me around his little finger so much, I really just didn't understand how to say no. And that's the important bit in this story, is to, if you think you're listening to the story and you think that somebody, you know, close to you, family, friend, complete stranger, whatever, is, you know, abusing you, the important thing is to talk to somebody. And for me, I didn't talk to somebody quick enough. I didn't really think anything was wrong because he had said don't tell anybody, but also he'd made it seem so normal that I didn't understand it was wrong. So for this whole time, we had continually been going to our drama group that we both attended. And he would basically just take me because he could drive and everything. We would turn up and everything was fine for quite a few months. And then I think when time got on, and I was about 18 and a half at this point, nearly 19, and I think he had realised that I was starting to suss things out. And he then showed more of an aggressive side to himself. And you know, that's what almost pushed me over the edge. So I remember, you know, him pulling up into a car park and, you know, we'd had an argument in the car. He had pulled up and I had went to go and get out. He had then grabbed my wrist and pulled me back into the car. Well, she was a little van, but yeah, he pulled me back into the van. And I had ripped my wrist away from him, and I'd said, no, I do not want to stay back in the van. And I'd started profusely crying. He had gone, don't you dare go into drama group, like, crying that badly. So eventually he managed to get me to sit on the edge of the seat in the car and calm down. But I went in separate from him because that was the first time he'd actually shown his aggression. Before then, he'd came across as this, like, calm, like, friendly man. And this was the first time when he'd actually shown his aggression. So this was about 3 or 4 weeks before actually I came clean and told the police. I said like I came clean, but I didn't really have anything to confess. It was more just I told the police what had happened. I didn't, as I said, this whole time I had no idea what was going on was wrong. So we went to drama group. I had that drama group. He took me home, all the bits and pieces. A few weeks later, so about 2 weeks after he'd first shown this aggression incident, he had been aggressive towards me a few other times, but I had just kind of taken it as if he's in a bad mood. Like, I didn't really understand why he was being aggressive. But now, when looking back on it, I see he was being aggressive because he thought he was going to be found out. And obviously he then was found out. So I then attended the drama group about 2 weeks later. And so one of my friends at the time, and unfortunately we're not friends anymore, and that is such a sad thing because I actually was quite liking being her friend, and we'd gone to school together, hadn't really been close at school, and then I went to the drama group and we recognised each other and we became a bit more friendly from then on. But I think that she was one of the people who saved me, and she knows this, but I don't think I've ever properly thanked her. So I want to give her a personal thank you. I don't have her number anymore, and I'm not in contact with her anymore, which is quite unfortunate. But if you're listening to this and if you're watching this video, then you know who you are, so thank you. She basically, 2 weeks after he'd become aggressive, she came up to me actually with another girl from the drama group. So 2 of these younger girls were about the same age as me, and she had mentioned concerns to this other girl about, potentially the guy overstepping and, something going on. She didn't know fully what was going on, but I think she kind of knew. I think she kind of, knew that he could be sexually abusing me. She said to me, is anything going on between you and X, this person? And initially I said, no, nothing's going on. And I kind of started crying, and I think she kind of knew that something was going on. She didn't want to make it any worse, basically, with the 2 people there. So I'd then gone off to the toilet and I'd calm myself down and I'd, kind of compose myself. Later on in that drama group, I think it was just before we had left, I can't remember, or maybe it was the next drama session. Like, my memory's quite foggy from that particular period of time. But it was either later on in that drama session or it was the next week. I pulled her aside and I said, can I talk to you? And she goes, yeah, of course you can. Do you want to go anywhere private? And I said, oh, yes, please. So we went into a spare drama room in this hall and I said, he's been touching me. And she said, oh my gosh, I kind of knew something was going on, but I didn't realise it was that much. She let me cry, she gave me a hug, and she basically said that, she was encouraging me to go to the police about it. She said that, I didn't have to, but she also explained that because he works around kids in the drama group, it would be beneficial because if I went to the police, it would give me a sense of security, but also it would make it stop, and also that means they could ban him from the drama group. I went to the police, but I went to the police through her mum. So her mum actually worked for the police, in a part of the police, not directly in the force, but in one of the offices, I think. She then told her mum, who then talked to one of the sergeants and opened the case. That evening, I had gone home to my parents' house and I sat down at my mum's feet. So my mum was on the sofa, my dad was on the other side of the sofa, and I sat down next to my mum. I was upset, I was crying, I, didn't feel very well. And then I looked up at my mum during one of the advert breaks, looked up at my mum and I goes, Mum. And she goes, yeah. I said, he's been touching me. And she goes, what? And I goes, he's been touching me. And then, so she then told my dad to turn the TV off and listen, which my dad loves his telly, so he muted it, I think. But she then said, tell your dad what you'd said to me. And I goes, he's been touching me. And my dad, this is the first time I'd really ever seen my dad be that protective over me. And so basically my dad, he looked really angry and really seething at this person because he was like, you've touched my little girl. Although I wasn't really a little girl, you've touched my little girl, you've touched my daughter. And, you know, obviously he got angry. And so my dad told his colleague, and his colleague actually lived a few doors down from the abuser. And we used to see him quite regularly because we'd go to the pub, and, you know, I used to sing at the pub sometimes. And, you know, that would be like an evening thing. You know, he found out about it, and then he told all the people that like were friendly with my abuser and like everything. And he was shunned. He was completely shunned. Like, he went into that pub, I think, a few weeks later, and they just wouldn't talk to him. And I'm like, serves you right. So that's the end of part 2 of my elaborated sexual abuse story. I hope you have gained some information and it has kind of helped you to gain a better understanding of the storyline of this abuse. And I will see you in part 3.
Nobody can make her feel down. She was always smiling from ear to ear, and everybody wondered.